tale of the Adeptus Mechanicus in the EO sector is a tale of two forge worlds, one local, known as Blackwater, stable and reliable for centuries, if a little unorthodox, the other foreign, known as Faber Invicta, refugees of a lost sector born anew from the fires of war and failure, now forced to take on the burdens of a sector that isn't theirs. Today, we shall cover the latter. Hello everyone and welcome to my little corner, my homebrew sector of EO, where today we're going to be looking at the Mechanicus force that's found itself without a home, but certainly not without a purpose, in the 41st millennium, as they look to reclaim what they have lost and undo the mistakes, or worse, of a fellow forge world growing increasingly isolated. If you want to skip forward to the minis, then feel free, but if you like cool backstories and lore, then stick around, as that's what this channel is all about. And much of this tale not only occurs outside of the EO sector, but starts before it even existed. The origins of Faber Invicta would see them founded during the waning days of the Dark Age of technology, as part of a galactic expansion, before the Age of Strife cut the galaxy apart. Unlike many worlds, they would not resort to barbarism, but instead seclude themselves as a minor stellar empire through those dark days, maintaining fragments of SDC technology. With its alliance of small systems relying solely on the Forge world, the engineers would take on a role strikingly similar to the tech priests of Mars. Upon rediscovery, negotiations would last for nearly a decade, with Mars overjoyed at the level of technology preserved. The Forge world had at some previous time been charged with supplying and growing frontier worlds, having possession of giant terraforming machines, titans, atmospheric processors, great plasma generators, excavation engines, habitat fabrication systems, and more. Having clearly grown its own sector long before, it was now being requested to do the same for others and embrace the Omnissiah and the Emperor. Integration once agreed was swift, and the sector was quickly expanded upon, its Titan legions recognised, and power in the Imperium would begin to explode in the region. Conflicts would immediately spring up against the Eldari and the Orcs as Faber Invicta, the world that stood invincible against the dark, joined the crusade. Earliest records of the heresy show an open declaration for the Emperor, by the Forge world and its surrounding sector, now going by the name of Kai Shen, with traitor ambassadors being executed before negotiations could even begin. As a result, traitor fleets launched a massive invasion intended on severing the industrial world supporting Faber Invicta, leading to a number of major battles, including the orbital ring defense, whereby naval and civil dockyards were unsuccessfully defended against traitor battle fleets, resulting in the siege of Nogatu and subsequent retaking of the world. Another battle was the devastation of Oroki, whereby the hive cities would come under attack from traitor guard and heretic Astartes, supported by demon engines, leading to a successful defense by Faber Invicta's Titan legions. Then came the Battle of 12 Forges, which was a civil war amongst the cybernetic forces of Faber Invicta after a Dark Mechanicus infiltration. An interesting note is that one of the oldest records appears to be an investigation originally launched during the final year of the heresy. Investigation 016, Eterna. Case status open. Subject loss, theft, or unaccounted relocation of Imperator-class strategic terraforming assets, which if true may possibly be one of the largest misplacements or successful thefts in galactic history. Thousands would be captured, tortured, interrogated and servitorized in their hunt for these lost machines, but no answer would definitively be found, or none ever disclosed. In the years to come, the investigation was ceased as more pressing matters would force the Forge world's attention to aiding and rebuilding worlds destroyed during the heresy. Subsequent generations would rationalize these events with many explanations, but the most logical was that it was a consequence of the conflict at the time, and it, along with many of the early history, would now be lost to the passage of time in archival depths, long before the destruction of Faber Invicta itself. In the wake of the heresy, a number of hive worlds were reconstructed. Many more, including night worlds, would petition to join the Forge world's administration for protection and security, and it would be granted, expanding the sector to nearly 60 planetary systems. The scouring would bring with them the Iron Harvest campaigns, during which Faber Invicta scouts tracked a traitor horde to a refuge in the far reaches of the Kaishen sector. Upon further investigation, it was noted that these worlds held much value in untapped metals. Launching an offensive, these battles saw them fight fallen Skitari, heretic auxiliary forces, and even small numbers of traitor Astartes. Whilst they were certainly not alone in fighting these wars, and they are seldom remembered now by any imperial historian, these small victories ensured the survival of dozens of worlds, and although it would take many years, these vital worlds would not be given over by the forces of Faber Invicta. All were eventually claimed or reclaimed, providing the continual source of raw ore to the Forge world that would carry them through future millennia. The heretic forces would slink away. In M33, imperial settlements were expanded beyond and to the west of the Iron Harvest campaigns. As a defensive position against future enemy forces, Faber Invicta was entrusted with supporting and establishing this new frontier. Over the subsequent millennia, these lines would come under relentless attack from the Orcs, and until the 41st millennium would see the greatest battles in the Kaishen sector's history. Whilst many of these colonies would, in time, ultimately fall to the Xenos and heretics, a few would survive to the 41st millennium itself. And by the end of this tale, all of these worlds will have eventually fallen to the Tyranid scum. Many years before, during the closing years of the Great Crusade, Imperial explorers identified a region beyond and below the southeastern frontier of Kaishen's borders. Whilst it would apparently see little happen in the millennia between, with the blessings of Mars and Terra, during M34, Forge World Invicta would be charged with supporting the establishment of this new sector, committing vast fleets of engineers, Skitari, and planet-shaping equipment to transform the region into a future bastion of Imperial industry. Faber Invicta would uphold this immediately and begin expansion. Atmospheric processors, continental excavation engines, orbital construction platforms, and countless other machines of colonization departed its docks aboard immense mechanics convoys. To the wider Imperium, this new sector and its worlds appeared nothing short of miraculous. World after world possessed almost ideal foundations for hive cities, manufactura, and orbital infrastructure, and the sector was celebrated as a treasure trove of untapped industrial potential. Any who questioned this narrative were quickly removed. The project promised to be one of the greatest industrial undertakings in the region's history, yet it would not last. As exploration in this new and untapped region ballooned, it would touch the darkness of open space, where stars cling to the galaxy's stomach as if hanging by a thread. There, in the cold black waters of open void, another Forge world would be found, seemingly a lost colony of unorthodox but stable Mechanicus tech priests, who were welcomed back with open arms by the powers that be on Mars. After years of foundational toil, mechanical development was all but given over to this new Forge world that had come to be known as Blackwater, and the power structure of the new sector in its capital, Sindramundi. As crushing of a blow as this would be, Faber Invicta would in time thank their lucky stars that it occurred. Their focus was quickly pulled into the War of the Beast, as colossal wiles smashed into their sector. Over 20 worlds had been destroyed by the Green Sion's advance by the time they entered the Kaishen sector. Faber Invicta would stand strong, resulting in a 42-year war that left entire continents on the world of Takeo as little more than radioactive wastelands. Through the next few millennia, the Forge world's power in the region dominated. They supported passing Astartes chapters. They aided in fighting against Black Crusades, aided in defending pilgrim routes and supplying resources to the flourishing new sector of Io in the southeast. And the blooming of the Lilac Rose, which was, after investigation from the Forge world itself, concluded to be nothing but a nebula, likely caused by an exploding star. M40 would once again see conflict arise in the region, as a series of mining moons turned out to be hosts to the Necrons. After a short and painful awakening to the alien strength, Invicta would utterly obliterate all remnants of the Xenos filth in orbital bombardments that would leave the small worlds of Shinza, Hori, and Hideyori shattered across the void of open space. Whilst they would never come to rival such giants as Mars, Risa, and others, they were not too far off, becoming the industrial backbone of countless frontier worlds, both near and far, surrounded by supporting sector of feudal agri-worlds, prosperous hive worlds, and defensive fortifications. Named locally the Blue Hearth, after its vast deserts of blue sand that cover its surface, matched by the blue robes worn by their people. As per Mechanicus culture, the Forge world sought perfection through the machine, its people holding onto an ancient maxim: the same spark moves through all worthy vessels. Through titans, engineering platforms, void ships, data terminals, the focus of this phrase lay in maintaining and perfecting the vessel, the spark being the divine impulse to pursue knowledge, understanding, and preservation of the Omnicized works. The Emperor himself was seen as the perfect vessel, the Holy Omnicide made manifest, and the greatest achievement of humanity's quest for knowledge. For 10 millennia, the Forge world operated in routine monotony, typical of the Adeptus Mechanicus. Faber Invicta's tech priests and Scutari lived and fought alongside many cultures and people. They defended settlements, restored failing infrastructure, and safeguarded technology that sustained their sector and beyond. But dedicated to their tasks, they ploughed forward, cold, calculated, and in many ways seemingly almost indifferent to the fleshy humans that surrounded them and depended on them. Flesh was weak, perfection lay in metal and wired circuitry. With a rigid class structure that would see their sole dedication to the machine god, every act, every job was seen as a form of worship, from coding data to mining ore to welding and riveting. All were sacred acts. The sounds of grinding metal, pipes venting, and iron pounded into form were the songs and the hymns of the machine god. The fighting force of Faber Invicta, the Scutari, were drawn from the Forge world's own population. Candidates were selected from those who displayed technical aptitude, physical endurance, loyalty, and the ability to endure the transformations required of a warrior of the Mechanicus. Their strength had been precision firepower, logistical superiority, and carefully calculated defences, allowing for human auxiliary forces to take the advancing frontal position as they struck and stuck to ranged combat. Then came M41, and the ruination of all that was. Crashing through the underside of the western frontier, a new threat would show its teeth in the form of the Tyranid Hive fleet, and world after world would fall dark, unnoticed until it was too late. But when it was, with mechanical precision, the Forge world reacted, mobilizing their forces with the same confidence that has served them for centuries and countless generations. Scutari marched, Titans stomped, and armor rolled to war. Battle fleets met hive swarms, and the result was utter carnage. With neither force having much knowledge of the other's methods and war doctrines, both would learn quickly, and both would suffer heavily in the lesson. The Tyranids, however, would learn quicker. 1 year later, they would come again, this time crashing through the black depths of Kai Shen's middle. Then again, 9, 6, 3 months later. Again and again, soon and as fast as the reinforcements could muster and backup could arrive, the enemy had gathered anew, or another tendril was spearing up through the galaxy's underside, crashing down on another world. For everyone they killed, 2, 10, 20 would take their place. They were being consumed, and this foe did not tire, did not flee, did not negotiate. Instead, it feasted, and it learned. As the years went on, world after world began to fall. Regiments were brought in from other sectors to help bolster forces. Famously, from the sector of Io, came those from Iskareth, Sindramundi, San Rivian, and more, but it was never enough. Mars would itself send reinforcements. Space Marine chapters, including the Obsidian Kings, and others, were dispatched to the region. Bastions were fortified, cities armed, strike forces ready, but each time, gnashing teeth of the hive fleets would chew its way through their lines. By simple numbers and attrition, they were worn down. From what they could gather, they were not alone. This invasion was spreading through many other sectors of the galaxy. Night houses and titans fell, regiments were consumed, and it was not long before the entire sector was on the back foot, worlds being evacuated, and the Forge world itself under siege. Some say that in those days, Bio-Titans crushed Manufactoria as workers continued their duties beneath them, forging shells and reactor components until their factories were overrun. Whilst this is a romantic notion, in reality Astra Militarum, PDF and civilian forces numbering in the billions fought alongside the last remaining Skitarii and tech priests in blood-soaked combat. Guardsmen held walls, blockaded passages as the dead and dying mounted. Tech adepts, priests and magi found themselves entrusting priceless artifacts to ordinary soldiers and civilians, ordinary humans who learned and adapted quickly to roles that far outstripped their technical knowledge, or died just as fast. Labourers manned failing production lines, void crews operated ancient vessels, and countless men and women, both augmented and not, gave all they could in efforts to hold back the tide. Dying in extraordinary numbers as their own worlds, then the blue hearth of Kai-Shen, the Forge world of Faber Invicta itself, was eaten alive. The Magi and Tech Priests were forced in their last moments to entrust that despite their flaws and failings, it would come down to humans to do all they could to keep what remained of being lost and destroyed. For centuries, the regular humans of the sector and beyond have relied on the Forge world's machines, their technology, their knowledge. Now Faber Invicta would have to rely on them. With the aid of human auxiliaries, PDF forces, through to the local peasantry, a united focus rallied around preserving the sector's once great cultures and the Forge world. Vaults were emptied, machine spirits transferred to arcships, and entire manufactorum districts relocated. Eventually, Faber Invicta would fall, and with all but a handful of the world's titans walking to their deaths, holding the final void ports on the Arctic shelf long enough for the last evacuation craft to leave. When the last fleet skipped into the warp, the sector barely existed. Over 70 worlds have been consumed, populations extinguished, entire cultures and histories all but erased. The great Forge world that has stood for 10 millennia as a bastion of imperial glory reduced to a barren husk. Once mighty forges, cold, desolate, darkened. The remnants of Kai-Shen carried with them what little they could of their former empire. Cores of their most sacred machines, STC fragments and incomplete memories of a civilization now lost. Converging at the far edge of their sector on the border of Io, and close to the stellar anomaly known as the Lilac Rose, over 3 weeks, ship after ship arrived. Pilgrim vessels, cargo haulers, battle cruisers, arc ships, billions of people. The Mechanicus was left almost speechless. Whilst they had lost so much had been saved. Even many of the gangs had handed over their takings without questions. Such dedication to the Omnissiah would impact them deeply. With the forces of Io and other sectors, Mars and more rotating into the combat field, it gave them time for the remnants of Kai-Shen and Faber Invicta to rest, recuperate, regroup and reorganize themselves. They would not take this chance lightly. In the months leading up to the Exodus, seeing the inevitable doom of their world and the wider sector, many political figures, including the Fabricator General Caldrus Magna of Faber Invicta, would approach and meet with the upper echelons of power in the now flourishing Io sector. The elites of Sindramundi, Miranda, Blackwater and others viewed the arrival of refugees into their sector with open caution, and thorough vetting procedures meant millions, if not billions, were now displaced, held up in facilities and colossal makeshift refugee camps. The arrival of a remnant Forge world on top of this was another massive political problem, especially in relation to the local Forge world's authority in Blackwater. Understanding this, rather than petition for dominion or agree to supplication to the local Forge world, Caldrus Magna would make the extraordinary declaration and plea to the present council. We seek no worlds, no stations, we seek no tithes, no authority. We ask only for sanctuary, enough to continue our great work and reclaim what we have lost. The agreement that followed was almost unheard of. Invicta would be allowed to establish itself as a remnant enclave, retaining its own independence as a fleet-based forge on the sector's outskirts. Back at the fleet, the surviving scribes would begin to sift through what they had left, and amongst those shattered archives, was that old maxim, the same spark moves all worthy vessels. And from the chaos of slaughter and the exodus of Kai-Shen sector came a new understanding. The Mechanicus of the Forge World Faber Invicta were forced to accept. Faced with the reality of their own hugely depleted forces, and the undeniable witnessing to so many ordinary humans so steadfastly set on standing their ground in those last days, giving their lives, refusing to let knowledge die, and fighting to exfiltrate resources, refugees, technology, literature, art, data archives, heirlooms, sacred machinery, and sometimes the most simple and bizarre of items that only a human would care for. They could no longer deny to themselves that the innate spark to learn, to protect, and preserve knowledge was something that extended beyond the boundaries of the Mechanicum alone. That is not to say humanity was comparable to the machine, but that this spark may extend to some degree into general humanity. However flawed, however misguided, ultimately humanity held the omniscient gift for knowledge and preservation deep within itself, his spark, his fire, and under the right circumstances, under the right pressures, and with the proper fuel, it could be nurtured. This did not put them at odds with Mechanicus' teachings. Humanity was still as flawed and corrupted as it has always been, but a newfound appreciation had been uncovered for their kin, a small sense of respect that was not there before. In dire need of support, they would amend their understandings of their ancient text and place it at the forefront of future endeavours, running a massive recruitment campaign and driving as many of the flooding refugees as they could into service. They did not have to press hard. Thousands of people, with nothing left to lose or having aided the Mechanicus in their sector's defence or escape, signed up. The Nids had consumed their worlds, their livestock, their land, but it didn't consume everything. Forgotten data crypts, lost technology that had been abandoned, sacred iconography, machines, even the honoured dead. The people would see it back in their hands, dedicating their lives to service in the Mechanicum. Many more, inspired by heroic tales, wanting vengeance, adventure, or simply refusing to see their sector gone, would join the cause. Few had any concept of what this truly meant, and fewer still would make it. Thousands would perish simply in training or augmentation, but none were turned away. In time, millions would join, and the continual influx of new waves of Kai-Shen remnants meant no tithe would be required for many years. The Tyranids forced the world to abandon many of its old war doctrines. Ways that had seen them through 10 millennia had failed them spectacularly. Defence lines were broken and swallowed. Ammo ran dry. Soldiers trapped in their own robes were dragged to their deaths. However, for now, Invicta had a chance to look internally, and would take this opportunity to observe what they had learned in their defeat. Thus Faber Invicta adapted, focusing their efforts into specialising in brutal close quarters combat. Long-bladed weapons designed for severing alien limbs and piercing exoskeletons became a defining feature of their warriors. Unit sizes shrunk to focus more on fast-moving and subsequently more independently manoeuvrable and operationally tactical kill teams known as cohorts. The Skitari becoming less like guards of the machine and more like soldiers of a dying civilization, with surviving and reclaimed knights taking on the names of fallen houses, tanks of cities, titans taking the names of moons, and starships taking worlds. Before augmentation, recruits are required to study the history of the conflict, memorizing worlds, cities, manufactura, data archives and more, with Skitari units taking on the names of famous battles, sieges, and strategic events. Aesthetically they would change as well. Their long robes were abandoned for lighter cloths, keeping the blue colour of their homeworld, but over this, higher ranking individuals would be awarded a red cloak, representing both the red of Mars, and for the common folk, the blood spilled by the people of the world and the wider sector in its defence. Helmets were reformed to their now broad, iconic, conical field hats, which offered wide protection against glancing blows to the face and head from swinging talons, as well as atmospheric protection from ash, sun, rain, and biological hazards. On top of this, they also served as a reminder of the equipment ordinary people who stood behind the Scutari in the far desert mining worlds in their last days. Whilst many of these subtle changes were necessary, many were not, such as the sandal shoe design on their feet. Whilst this was seen as a pointless endeavour by many, its value was argued to be of metaphorical importance to humans, and as a reminder of the footwear worn by civilians in trenches of their agri-worlds, helping to garner support from the remnants and drive recruitment. But one thing through it all that the Forge would ensure is that those chosen, who proved themselves fit for a life service in dedication to the Omnissiah, did not simply come to be soldiers or engineers, or simply to maintain, build and fight. They came to be reclamators, guardians of the spark, the flame. Their final initiation is receiving their forged lantern, a portable machine shrine containing a fragment of sacred fire said to have been lit on that final day of their homeworld. It is claimed that as their world fell, a priest stood at the final forged fire and announced that as long as one of their kind carried the flame of this fire, Invicta would always stand. In reality, the flame is a result of microforges held within, powering a small ocular device, targeting array and visual sensor that aids the unit in combat. But that truth, or the fallacy of the story behind it, is irrelevant. Yet again, the lantern was seen as symbolic, a visual symbol to both themselves and others that their job was to preserve knowledge, protect humanity, and ensure that the light of the homeworld and the divine light of the Omnissiah never vanishes. Their doctrine became simple. The Forge may fall, the flame must not. Invicta would commit its Scutari cohorts to the protection of every remaining world within reach in the Kaishen sector, reinforcing evacuation corridors and holding defensive lines long after victory had become impossible. Every expedition was deemed a reclamation, their objective rarely being conquest. Instead, they recovered archives, vaults, archaeotech, machine spirits, lost knights and titans, and far more. If the world itself could not be reclaimed, they would ensure its secrets were. Yet as their kill teams waged war against the horrors of the Tyranids once more, things were not all roses in the EO sector, and this new relationship with the political elite would see tensions build between themselves and the Forge world of Blackwater. When Faber Invicta entered the EO sector, they had expected suspicion upon their arrival, and instead been granted sanctuary and welcomed with open arms, the fabricated general of Blackwater receiving them with impeccable courtesy. Dockyards were opened, resources and equipment reallocated with efficiency, and everything indexed correctly, every protocol, rite and ritual observed and honoured with mechanical precision. It should have been reassuring, a sign that perhaps their luck had changed, but for some reason it was not. They had seen criminals of humanity raiding priceless artifacts, only to hand them over as if ridding themselves of soiled clothes. And for some reason, that had been more reassuring than this. For some reason, none of Invicta's Magi present could articulate this encounter with a fellow Forge world, one they had themselves, in millennia past, aided, supplied, and given the ability to forge their own sector, set off an almost primal alarm bell that no one could voice or reason. Again and again, there was never a breach of doctrine, never a word uttered that could be openly challenged. Questions would go answered, every explanation reasonable, believable. Blackwater had clearly existed in isolation for some time before reintegration into the Imperium. They were unorthodox to say the least, but something about them was... their welcome had been too... no one could quite put a finger on it, and to voice such thoughts would surely be seen as paranoia, heresy even. Many tech priests and magi questioned themselves more than their hosts. Perhaps it was grief, perhaps it was their own human failings. After so much fighting, had they become suspicious themselves? With all that was changing, perhaps they were forgetting things, misremembering doctrines. Perhaps it was they, and not Blackwater, that were the unorthodox ones. They dismissed it, but each encounter the feeling would begin to eat away at them a little more. Soon, however, joint operations became increasingly uncommon. Invitations to support reclamation missions politely denied, every refusal explained through reasonable means. Production quotas, reactor maintenance, resources and materials would arrive incomplete, escort ships delayed, administratum approvals vanishing. Not every time. At first, not even most of the time. But time and again, coincidence, bureaucratic hold-ups, piracy, and almost every conceivable excuse was put forward. Nothing in isolation could ever be proven or warrant a full investigation. Whenever concerns were raised, replies were courteous, measured, and entirely reasonable. Then the true withdrawals began. At first they were temporary, outlying facilities and stations reporting routine maintenance, and then quietly being decommissioned. Units and fleets being relocated. Priests not showing up for duty for days at a time, citing sudden reassignment, or not coming back at all, leaving vital machinery unattended. Diplomatic exchanges would become more infrequent, then almost ceremonial, then absent altogether. Over and over again, Invicta would find itself being called upon to fill the gaps that Blackwater left, and slowly it would begin to take on more and more of the sector's burdens. Border patrols began to disappear, research enclaves closed their doors, and astropathic traffic diminished. Night houses, hive cities, industrial factories, and stations began requesting maintenance from Invicta instead of, or in the absence of, their own Forge world. When Magi, commanders, and political leaders sought answers, or even gave answers, they were always given polite, reasonable, comprehensive, yet somehow unsatisfying. Invicta, however, would answer every request, not out of ambition, but out of a feeling of necessity. Blackwater offered no objection, yet they would find machines, sacred to the Omnissiah, unresponsive to their prayers, their rites. Minute variations in binary code that didn't make sense, faults that seemed to be maintained through design. It reminded them in some ways of those ordinary humans during those dark days, reciting scripts they didn't fully comprehend, yet somehow worse. By this point, even the fabricated general of Invicta could no longer ignore that human gut instinct he had not been unfounded. Blackwater was either collapsing in on itself or isolating itself. And in their absence, he would remember that first sense of unease not mentioned in the archives during the first contact millennia ago. Something in that time had changed. What was it? It was as if behind that original hospitality was an unspoken truth, that Invicta were in fact never welcome here, and deep down in the glass of the mechanical eyes of Blackwater's people were held daggers of pure hatred. However, before Invicta could make any decisions, and anything was distributed back to Mars, the galaxy itself would once again split open. Warp routes would collapse, astropathic connections would fall silent, and swallowing the stars around much of the sector, the Cicatrix Maledictum would destroy all hope of outside interference. With the mechadendrites being pulled in every direction and their forces spread thin, Invicta would quietly begin to investigate their cousins, unearthing and comparing copies of ancient Martian scripts against those recited by their Blackwater kin. Others traced logistical data stretching back decades, centuries even, searching for patterns that lay just out of sight. More than once, Magi would emerge from contemplation, believing they had the answer, only to find their certainty evaporating in questionable proof or convoluted justifications. In time, accusations would begin to fly, with Faber Invicta seeing itself as repairing neglected infrastructure, restoring lost knowledge, correcting long-standing errors across the sector, and restoring the proper order of things. Blackwater clearly viewed these actions as interference, and whilst they never objected and remained as polite and courteous as ever, accused Invicta of damaging systems that had survived for thousands of years as a result of the trauma of losing their own sector. Neither side trusted the other, neither side could afford to fight the other, and the EO sector that was becoming home to both needed both. However, such repairs would begin to uncover other anomalies. Industrial foundations on worlds appeared to predate official planetary colonization. Infrastructure established before recorded settlements. Blackwater would seem to sense this growing scrutiny, and all but close its gates entirely. Invicta, and much of the rest of the sector, would no longer receive communications from the Forge world. But every investigation, every recovered fragment of data, and every unexplained machine uncovered another layer of suspicion and another layer of secrecy, and few would ever come to the surface, because even Invicta feared what the oldest records might reveal. Were they simply maintaining what Victor had given them in the past, a past now lost and unprovable, or, as they fear, had Blackwater been corrupted by the ruinous powers? Either way, both Forge World's fingerprints ran deep into the EO sector, through every wire and data cord, and through every machine spirit. In the eyes of the wider political establishment in the sector, both sides continue to serve the Imperium and have maintained loyalty to the Omnissiah. They have no choice but to see it so. Whilst both forges believe the other has lost something essential and believe the other is in the wrong, the question neither side wishes to ask is, if the truth was or is ever to finally be uncovered, would it prove one forge correct over the other? Or would it reveal that both had been wrong all along? Beyond their aesthetic to outsiders, Faber Invicta appears unusual, but still amongst the more orthodox of Mechanicus to deal with, especially in comparison to the unorthodoxy of Blackwater. They maintain ancient rites with absolute devotion, sometimes seemingly with more vigour than before. They worship the machine. They will send millions to their deaths if it means reclaiming an ancient relic. Yet there is something more subtle in their gestures, almost a mutual respect of humanity, or the common man, that didn't appear there before. To them, a forge requires a flame, a machine requires purpose, and humanity is the vessel where that fire, that spark, begins its journey, as it has been for every member of the Adeptus Mechanicus that has gone before them. And though their mindset may have evolved, their home may have changed, the coming of the Cicatrix Maledictum has left Faber Invicta as isolated now as it was when the ancient Forge world was first found. Cut off from Mars and the wider Imperium, and with few remnants of Kai-Shen to recruit from left, their sector almost totally devoured, the surviving fleets of the Blue Hearth now stand as unwelcome but necessary guests within a foreign sector. No longer merely a Forge world seeking refuge, they have become the guardians of a region they barely understand, forced to divide their strength between survival, restoration, and war. Their Skitarii cohorts are scattered across countless worlds, repairing failing infrastructure, restoring damaged manufactoria, and bringing lost relics back to service. And where EO's machines have decayed or been maintained through questionable practices, the warriors of Faber Invicta bring their knowledge, their rights, and the light of their lanterns, yet at the same time remain in another equally desperate campaign to reclaim every fragment of data, every lost pattern, and every surviving machine, every piece of civilization they failed to save, and they will be damned if they will see the EO sector fall, as Kai-Shen did. For Faber Invicta, survival is not enough. They must recover what is to be lost. They must preserve what remains, and they must ensure that the light of the Forge world never fades. For Invicta is their name, and Invicta is how they stand. Well, that's it for this one, guys. I'm sorry this video took so long. I've been going through a lot over the past couple months, and the past few weeks of heat just has made sitting in my house and painting and writing really difficult to do. But here we are, we persevere, we move forward. Just to go over the minis, these are just regular Skitarii with their robes cut off. From there I had to build up the legs a bit with some green stuff to actually bulk them out a little bit. And then I added the backpacks using a bit of plastic rod to make the banner pole, and cutting a bit and shaping a bit of thick paper or very thin cardstock to make the cog shape of the flag and super gluing that on. I obviously was going for a bit of an Asian theme here visually, so I went for like the sun hat look. The heads themselves are from Anvil Industries. I'm obviously not sponsored by them, but if you wanted to get them, that's where they're from. However, they don't come with the full face mask. They come with the rebreather, or they come with an open face, but they don't come with the goggles. So I basically had to add some green stuff over the eyepiece and then stick into the green stuff some very, very tiny offcuts of plastic rod. This rod is incredibly small. I'll add a photo for size comparison here so you get a picture of it. but instead of glue or tweezers, I simply touched the flat side of the tip of my hobby knife to my tongue, carefully, not to cut my tongue obviously, and then let the moisture cling to the piece of rod. I can then place that accurately and press it into the green stuff, smoothing out the after bit with whatever this tool is here. The swords are just taken from other Mechanicus boxes from Bits Box. I simply cut the arms and hands to give them cool poses. The sniper here though was made just using a regular Skitarii kit with the legs cut and adjusted and then filled with green stuff. Not perfect, but I think he looks cool. The final piece however was the lanterns, which are taken from the Black Templars bits. I think they're censers or vials or something, but they have a good like Chinese lantern look, so I simply cut a bit of metal wire, bent it into shape and then super glued the lantern to the end, and I'm really proud of how they turned out. But hey, that's it for this one guys. If you enjoyed it, then please leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss another upload as we continue to explore my little corner of the 41st millennium. Thanks for watching guys, and until the next one, bye.